The Real Estate Sessions is sponsored by AdWorks. AdWorks makes digital advertising brilliantly simple. Choose your zip code and build your brand. Enter an address and promote your listings, or upload your list and stay top of mind with your sphere of influence. And if you go to adworks.com/Bill Risser, you'll do more than just build brand awareness or nurture your network. Right now, you get to save 15% off your purchase, and I get to send 10% to the Colon Cancer Alliance, an organization that means a great deal to me. That's adworks.com/Bill Risser.
You know, the means to produce anything you want, that's not really a problem anymore, right? But what is more interesting, I think, is that I don't think that we've really solved the people problem as an industry. There are fundamental sort of fears and questions that our customers have around our value and around our expertise that are in doubt.
Welcome to the Real Estate Sessions, where industry leaders share their stories and offer tips and advice to real estate professionals. Now your host, Bill Risser of Fidelity National Title in Tampa, Florida.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 109 of the Real Estate Sessions podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing the show with a friend. It's how we grow. And if you really like what you're hearing, go ahead and head over to iTunes. Maybe leave a rating and a review. I appreciate it. Today's guest, I've had the privilege of meeting before at an Inman Connect event in New York City a few years ago. And at that time, I believe he was transitioning between jobs, and appropriately enough, I think he's doing the same thing right now. We'll find out soon. I'm talking about Matthew Shadbolt, the Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Inman News. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Hey there, Bill. Great to talk to you and great to be here.
Now, I know that a few of our listeners, probably a couple of them, just an odd person or two, don't realize that you're British. But maybe with that little introduction in your voice, they do now. Where in Great Britain did you grow up?
I grew up in Somerset, which is in the sort of far west of England, very rural. The nearest city is Bristol, which is a good 2.5 hours drive away from where I actually grew up. So the best way I can characterize it is if you sort of imagine, you know, those movie openers of Jane Austen dramatizations, and you have the rolling English countryside, the dry stone walls, fields of sheep and cows, that kind of thing, like sort of beautiful valleys. Like that's pretty much what it's like there. It's farm country. So it's like the equivalent of coming from sort of Kansas or Iowa or something like that here in the States.
Now, did your father work in the area there? What did he do for a living?
Yeah, he did work nearby. My father was in the Navy, so we actually moved around a fair bit when I was a kid, moving from naval city to naval city. And but he got a job at an airbase in Somerset because he was a helicopter engineer. So, you know, we moved around a lot, but we also sort of traveled a lot as well. We had a sort of fairly cosmopolitan upbringing in terms of, you know, going on family vacations to Europe and up and down the length and breadth of England, going to things. I think my parents were pretty good at sort of exposing me to a lot of historical things. Like I remember going to a lot of castles and sort of stately homes and art galleries and things like that. So they were pretty good about you know, travel and things like that. And I think it ultimately probably sowed the seeds for getting the travel bug and moving around a lot when I was at college, and then ultimately moving to America later on professionally.
We're going to talk about that in a minute, but I love it when a guest, you know, has a little bit of a sports love, and I want to talk to you about yours. You mentioned a little something in a conversation we had, and so I know I'm going to call it a big Yeoviltown Football Club fan, and I'm going to tell you right now, I had no idea what that was until I looked it up.
Yeah, it's you use the word love. It's a tough love being a Yeoviltown fan, for sure. They're a League Two team, which is the fourth league down. So there's some distance from the English Premier League and the Chelseas, Manchester Uniteds, and Arsenals of the world. They're a very small club, but I really love them. They're my local team from when I grew up, and they never really come to anything. They've had a few good runs over the past few years, but they're just a very, very scrappy, much loved local team. It's I actually have a parallel here in the States because I'm actually a Browns fan as well. So they're actually pretty close in terms of achievement with the Browns. That's for sure. So I picked two winners there for sure.
All right. Wait a minute.
It's tough.
How does a kid from Somerset fall in love with the Cleveland Browns?
Now this is I tell the story quite a lot because it's the first thing people say. It's like, how on earth did you become a Browns fan?
Right.
When the NFL first started to be televised in the UK, it was 1985. So I was 12 then. And it really, really caught my imagination and almost certainly started to really sow the seeds for moving over here, because I would watch those games and we would get one game a week, and it was usually just highlights. It was like an hour or a 90-minute show.
Sure. And
you would get like the highlights of one game, and then you would get the scores sort of recap as part of this. And it was Frank Difford that used to do the coverage. I do remember that.
Nice.
And it was sort of specifically packaged for the English audience who, thought that this was kind of really nuts, like all the padding and the pageantry of it all. And it's really kind of this incredible spectacle that we had never really seen before. So, the first ever Super Bowl I watched was Chicago Bears, the Refrigerator, Jim McMahon, Walter Payton, incredible experience where they just crushed the Patriots. I started to watch a lot more of these things on a regular basis, sort of 85, 86. And I said, well, I should probably pick a team. And I remember watching the Goodyear blimp footage flying over Cleveland. And it was cold and gritty and industrial. And down there in the dog pound, you got like the big guys with their shirts off with the letters painted on them and the dog masks. And the Browns were really, really good then. They got to the championship game two years in a row. And, they very famously sort of choke against Denver 2 years in a row. That's like you got the drive, and the goal line fumble from Cleveland, all those kind of things.
Right.
But I thought, this is a team with some real heart. And they have this incredible following. And there was something about that aerial footage of like the industrial Ohio sort of area that really sort of captured my imagination. And I thought, you know what, that's my team. That's a team I could really get behind. And, they had those two sort of amazing years, Bernie Kosar and Ernest Biner, great player. And I thought, that's my team. So I'm going to support the Browns. I'm going to be a Browns fan. And in hindsight, it's an absolutely terrible choice, because what happened to the Browns, like after 87, where there's periods where they don't even, they move to Baltimore, they don't even have a franchise at some point, and then they sort of come back later on, and they're still, they got a lot of like first round picks. Let me put it that way. But there's something about them, and it's very similar to my sort of passion for Yeovil Town. Is there's something about Cleveland that just makes me really believe that they're going to do it. It's so funny. Last season they won one game, and I remember getting a lot of promotional emails that were selling game winner jerseys. That's how bad it got. That's how bad it got. It's like you could win a game winner jersey was available. I was like, oh man, life is tough for these guys. One of my sort of bucket list things is to go and see a game in like the dead of winter. Unfortunately, January and sort of late December games aren't really on the schedule for Cleveland, but to just go and see it in like sort of freezing cold and just go see a great game, like against the Steelers, like Cleveland Steelers or something like that. Sure. That'd be really great, I think. Look,
Sean Carpenter's within driving distance. You and I and Sean, we're going to do that sooner than you think. That would be so much fun. So you're the second Browns fan I know. The other guy is Jim Plummer, a realtor in Phoenix who's from Cleveland. So I know 2 Browns fans now. That's great.
There you go. We exist. Somebody's going to love them.
So it's funny how you, as a child, you picked up this love for American football. But I'll tell you what, there are I call millions of people today because of the coverage of the Premier League and La Liga and Bundesliga and all this stuff. There are a ton of, we'll call it real football lovers over from Europe that are happening here as well. That's kind of a neat to see it happening both ways. There's this crazy thing that happens in England with all the soccer clubs. I can only explain it like it's almost like saying, hey, in baseball, all you clubs, even you single A and rookie league ball clubs, you're all going to play in this tournament, and you might end up playing the Yankees. Am I right? Is that what that is? It's called the FA Cup?
Yeah, the FA Cup, it works exactly like that. It's like if you were to take like all the college football teams and like every single sort of minor team right up to, the people in the NFL, and they all compete against each other. It's a knockout tournament. So the chances of, Yeovil Town playing Manchester United are actually pretty high inside of the FA Cup. And it's a great thing that the sort of country really sort of rallies around. And it every now and again, there'll be some little club that will have this incredible run of success. But it's a knockout tournament, and it ends up, with a big game at Wembley Stadium at the end between two clubs. It's usually premier clubs, right. But every now and again you'll get somebody that's a massive underdog. It's a great tournament, great spirit around that thing for sure.
You go to college in Great Britain, and what were you working towards? What was Matthew thinking about as he's 23, 24 and headed out, into the world?
So I went to college in London. So I moved from Somerset to London, and I studied at Kingston University, which is in the suburbs of London. It was a great time to be in London. I was there in the mid-90s. So, that's right at the height of Britpop. And, was a huge music fan, still am, but huge music fan at the time. Would go out and see all the great bands at the time. And it was just a really good spirit in the country at the time. England were winning in the football at the national level. Tony Blair came in as a new prime minister, and there's a lot of energy around that. There was just a really good sort of vibe, especially in London. It's a really, really good time to be a student. But then I left when I graduated college in London in 96. I went and did 2 years for my master's in Holland. I lived in the south of Holland in a town called Maastricht. And I studied at a place called the Jan van Eyck Academy, which is a very, very small academy. They only take 8 people a year per discipline. So there's art, design, and theory are the 3 disciplines. So there's only ever 24 people there at a time. Wow. And I was in the art department, but it was really, really predicated on this sort of cross-disciplinary stuff. So when I was at college, I went to college and studied art history and photography, but I was really interested in digital photography. I remember us getting Photoshop 1 in the photo lab. It's black and white. You couldn't really do anything. No type tool. Very, very limited. But I was like, there was something that really sort of caught my attention with that stuff. I was like, this seems like really, really interesting. The idea of being able to do all this stuff on the computer. So I went to Holland, and I mainly, even though I was in the art department, I really, really worked very, very closely with the design faculty there. And spent most of my time in front of a computer there, and ended up learning how to make websites, learning how to make CD-ROMs. That's how long ago this was. Learning how to make CD-ROMs, video games, virtual environments, 3D modeling, and I learned how to become a designer there. And I learned from some of the best. They had an incredible faculty there. One of the teachers was the guy that had designed the money in Holland, which was fairly intimidating to have a one-on-one with him. Wow. But I learned how to become a designer. So when I came back after 2 years in Holland, I had a professional skill in a way that perhaps you wouldn't have leaving college with like an art history degree, in quite the same way. So so when I came back to London, I started to sort of apply for web designer and sort of interactive type jobs, and then was fortunate to get a job at the Shopping Channel in London, and that's sort of my journey through sort of college into my first job. I started at the Shopping Channel. That was my first gig.
What was that, the gig that kind of then that helped you transition to the United States as well?
Yeah, that's exactly it. They're a London-based company, UK Shopping Channel, but the mothership was in just outside of Philadelphia, Chester County, Philadelphia. We would often go back and forth, either for training trips or just to sort of learn how those teams worked, and then we would sort of take all those learnings back and sort of build them into what we were doing in the UK. But I worked very, very closely with the US team. One of my bosses in the UK actually transitioned to take a more senior role at the mothership in the US, and a year later invited me to come over there and join him. And it was the weirdest, most surreal experience ever, because the phone just rang one morning on my desk, and it was my former boss, who is now working in QVC US. And he said, I know that you're interested in coming to live and work in America. I think I might have something for you. And he explained that they were looking for a head of design on the broadcast TV graphics side. And he sort of outlined what they were looking for. And he said, just have a think about it and see, let me know what you think. And I remember putting the phone down, and these were in the days where I used to be a smoker. And I went outside the building and I sort of had a cigarette, and I was thinking about it. And then I had another cigarette and just did another lap of the building, really thinking about it. And I was like, well, I know I have a week to think about this, but I think this is really what I want to do. So 15 minutes later, I called him back and I said, okay, let's think about what we could do here. And that was how the journey started for me. I didn't really spend too long thinking about it, because I think in many ways I'd always been thinking about it.
Right. This is late 90s, right, when this happens?
This is like late 99, early 2000 that we started to have this conversation. Yeah. Okay.
Then you entered the world of real estate, and boy, way to do it. Way to start small at a little boutique brokerage.
Oh yeah, no pressure on that one, right? Gosh.
Yeah, let's talk about you and the Corcoran Group.
Sure. Yeah, so I'd moved to New York. So I moved to Philadelphia, and then a number of years later, I moved to New York to go work for Corcoran. One of the things that I was really interested in is just really focusing on the web. And when I joined Corcoran, I knew very, very little about real estate, but I knew a lot about the web and how the web worked, and had some real thoughts about where the web was going. So I joined Corcoran in 2006, and they were in a very, very interesting place in terms of their organization and their technology in particular. So Barbara Corcoran had recently departed the company. She had sold the company to NRT, and sort of quite literally rode off into the sunset on a white horse. Her goodbye party was literally that, her on a white horse riding off into the sunset.
Awesome.
What a character. She's really amazing. And as a result of Barbara's departure, there was new leadership, and there was a new CMO that they brought in, and they were looking for a web guy. And it just so happened that our paths managed to cross just exactly at the right time. And I got talking to them, and I had a number of interviews with Pam Liebman, their CEO, and Christina Panos, who ended up being the CMO there. And just to get a feel for kind of what they were looking to do. And Corcoran had always really prided itself on a spirit of being fairly forward thinking in terms of technology, which is great. but a lot of their efforts had really just been focused on their website. So early 2006, if you sort of imagine what that looked like, there's no Zillow, there's no Facebook, there's no iPhone. Social media is not something people are talking about. Google is still pretty nascent when it comes to things like, maps and even search sophistication, certainly buying ads in Google, for example. So over the course of almost 9 years, I sort of my job there was to sort of help Corcoran navigate all of that technological change that happened. So when I started, and this is the great irony of my work at Corcoran, is when I started, they had a website and they had one advertising relationship, which was with the New York Times. So we'll get to that later. But my work there, a lot of people in the industry know my work in social with Corcoran in particular, I think. But we did a ton of stuff there around app development, video, social, internal tools and CMS type things. I was afforded an incredible amount of opportunity to be very, very creative with the technology and also their brand. I was given a lot of latitude with the Corcoran brand, right. As it existed on the web, for sure.
One thing I'll never forget about when you were at Corcoran was the way you embraced location-based stuff as it came out. I mean, it was amazing what you were doing, with where people were in the city and what they, if they're checking in at Foursquare or, all those different opportunities when they came about.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun, and it's been a very interesting journey because I think it was sort of a one-off moment where you had so many new platforms launching all the time and new services launching all the time that Corcoran was able to deliberately sort of position itself as very innovative in taking advantage of a lot of these things, and we deliberately sort of fostered a very clear climate of that. A lot of it, as you said, centered around location. And we partnered very closely with people like Foursquare, which was an incredible amount of fun. But at the end of the day, it was all about sharing what's inside an agent's head. That's really what we thought we did is we took a perspective of, we are here to help you navigate New York City, and anything you want to know about New York, we are here to help. And it's either going to come from the brand or it's going to come from one of our agents, but nobody knows this stuff better than us. And everything we did was sort of informed by that spirit, sort of like a very, very clear sense of guidance and insight, but in a way that's not afraid to have some fun as well. We weren't afraid to be chatty on Twitter or to make jokes about things on Facebook, and we didn't take ourselves too seriously, which I think is important here as well.
So that's that British sense of humor you brought over to the group, right?
Very dark, sarcastic sense of humor.
Exactly. You didn't quite go Ricky Gervais on everybody, but you had to lay back a little.
I love Ricky Gervais. That's totally my humor. Everything to do with Ricky. I love him.
My wife's a massive Anglophile, and so I'm exposed to it through osmosis. It's great. So you're talking about, what's in an agent's head is kind of the most important information to get out. That still applies today. That's not changing, is it? It's still, how do they get that information out to show that they're the expert? Yeah,
it's a fairly evergreen idea that quite honestly is always going to resonate with the customer. It's something that actually sort of came back during my time at the New York Times as well. It's this idea of being relentlessly helpful never goes out of style. And the best agents I saw at Corcoran always did this really well. And one of my favorite anecdotes around this kind of stuff was about sort of not being salesy with what you do, especially online. And I remember having a session there was an older agent, more tenured agent, and tremendous amount of experience, sold incredible penthouses in Tribeca, and he had taken this younger, very hungry agent under his wing, and I met with both of them, And the younger agent was like, right, we're going to do this on Facebook, and we're going to post listings here, and we're going to blow it out on Instagram, and we're going to do all this stuff, and incredible sort of energy around him, but very, very aggressive in terms of the sell. Right, there's a lot of selling, like come to our open house, and this is there's a motivated seller and all this kind of stuff. And I remember the older agent sort of just sort of leaned back in his seat, and he was very wise. And I remember him saying, he's like, the worst thing you could ever do is let them smell your commission breath. And I just thought, man, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is just never, ever let them know that. That's obviously, what the agent is that's the result, the end monetary result for the agent. But this idea of being able to smell the sell, if you like, is such a turnoff for people that you sort of, I feel like I see it in Facebook, that this kind of thing, that there's sometimes there's like a desperation to the posting, right? There's this sort of hunger for attention, and this sort of rabbit hole people go down around likes and engagement. And it's a very, very interesting thing to see, because on the flip side, I see agents being incredibly helpful and really thinking about service and community and how they serve the communities in really sort of innovative and helpful ways. And those are the people that are growing and sort of being recognized and, really, really doing great work, I think.
Boy, you've got to resist that urge to sell on social. It's tough because it's a platform and it feels like you can scream from the rooftops and everyone will hear it and everyone will love it, but you got to fight it, right?
Right. Or even just selling in real life, it's, unless it's understood, like when you go to the car dealership, it's understood that you're going to be sold. Like that's why you're in the building, right?
Yep.
Like there's an understood relationship there that's not quite as overt when you're when you're working with a realtor, I think.
I completely agree. Let me ask you about the transition away from Corcoran. Then you'd mentioned the New York Times earlier, but you ended up actually taking a position in the the real estate department, right? Of the Gray Lady. So let's talk. How did that come about?
Yeah, it was a very, very similar journey from QVC UK to QVC US. Literally one morning the phone rang. I mean, totally out of the blue, was not looking or anything like that. I had some health issues during the later years at Corcoran. I'd become very, very sick at one point, and Corcoran were incredibly good to me, incredibly good, really looked after me. Were very patient with me on sort of a fairly rocky journey. And, that kind of thing buys a tremendous amount of respect and loyalty, So when the phone rang and it was the New York Times, I was very torn, very, very torn about this. And they said, we're looking for somebody to come and run the real estate department at the New York Times. So I would essentially act as the general manager for everything to do with real estate there. And I had been a fan of the New York Times for a very, very long time reader. I'm a big believer in what the New York Times stands for. And we had worked very, very closely with the Times over the years at Corcoran. We've been an advertiser there. And I'd always sort of been interested in the journey that the Times is going on. They're a 160-year-old organization, but undergoing immense technological and cultural change internally, especially as the news becomes free everywhere. And the idea of paying for the news is just not something that resonates with people, especially younger people. So I said I would talk to them, and I went in and I had a few chats with them and decided to sort of pursue the interview process with them. And I had 17 interviews there. It's actually quite difficult to be hired at the New York Times. You have to go through quite a lot of process to be hired there. So I went through 17 different interviews. With numerous people, strategy people, real estate people, newsroom people, sales people, design people, project management people, all sorts of people. And so the vetting process is very, very extreme, I would say. The thought in the back of my mind is, I've gone through a pretty significant overhaul of my health and come out in a positive way on the other side. If I don't do this, I will always regret it. And I'll just be sat in the office at Corcoran, always thinking about what if. And I can't think like that anymore. I got quite a scare with my health, and I just really had this kind of carpe diem kind of philosophy. And I said, if I don't do it, I'll always regret it. So let's just go for it. And I have no regrets. I'm really, really happy that I did it. The Times is an incredible place to work. I was very, very sad to leave Corcoran because they had been so good to me and I'd had an incredible journey with them. But, quite honestly, when the New York Times calls, it's a very, very difficult thing to say no to.
I couldn't even imagine. I remember David Carr speaking at an Inman event, the late David Carr, right? And
yes,
what an amazing, and those people are probably just everywhere in the halls, I would guess, right?
Well, I mean, the idea that, you go in there and you start working there and you share the elevator with David Carr or Andrew Ross Sorkin or Sam Sifton from the cooking desk.
Right.
And it's very difficult not to be starstruck by your coworkers, by your own coworkers. Right. And, there's an incredible culture there. They're trying to do some very difficult things in terms of how they think about speed, how they think about technology, how they think about accuracy, their relationship to other news organizations. I think I was there for the election cycle, and it was fascinating to see how the New York Times operates in the face of everything that was going on. Absolutely fascinating. It's in once in a lifetime experience, without question.
Right. I want to double back a bit. You talked about your health scare. You and I we're part of a fraternity that no one ever wants to be in. How's that? Is that a way to put that? Yeah. But
that's a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
So we both were cancer victims, but we're a part of that subset of that fraternity where we're both cancer survivors. I was very public about my battle, and so were you. And I always like to ask people that were public. Was it a tough decision? Did you consult with your wife, or did you just know that this was something you wanted to kind of make sure everyone was kind of on board with?
I don't really remember. I mean, at the time I was very social because of my job. My job forced me to be incredibly social, right, and very, very active, because that's what I did all day was building the Corcoran brand through Facebook and Twitter and numerous other things. So for me, it was very natural to be that open. But when something that serious happens, it definitely changes your perspective on what's important. And a lot of the work that I was doing, around Corcoran's social efforts became a lot less important, and rightfully so, I think. For me, it was, I didn't feel a desire to sort of tell everybody in terms of sharing it, but I think that the resulting outpouring of support was incredibly helpful for my recovery. To know that people were cheering me on and wanted the best for me. Number one, I had no idea people felt like that about something like this with me. So I was incredibly humbled and incredibly flattered by it. And I've never seen another industry do this. I really believe that the real estate industry in particular is incredibly good at looking after each other. And I really believe that. And I'm very, very passionate about people that work in real estate, because I really believe that they care. And I saw it firsthand that they care. And I was very, very lucky. I was very, very lucky to have to be surrounded by so much of this stuff. And my wife had sort of been sharing the updates before I really started to sort of jump back into things. So people knew I was at the hospital, and they knew what I was going through, and it was incredible to see them really sort of pulling for me. And then when we got home and the real sort of recovery work begins, there was all sorts of stuff that came to the house. I mean, I remember one afternoon there was I forget what you call it, like a Peapod truck, like a home delivery grocery service truck that came to the house. And I said to my wife, "Did you get groceries?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, they probably have the wrong house. Let's go out and see what the deal is." And Corcoran had ordered a week's worth of groceries for us and had it delivered to the house. And the guy sort of brought it all in and left, and I just burst into tears because I couldn't believe it, what people were doing. And it's an amazing thing to see. And I really believe that the real estate industry it's what we're all about, is looking after each other with when each other needs it. Right. And seeing it firsthand, as I'm sure you did as well, Bill, seeing it firsthand is quite something.
You hit the nail on the head there. It's an amazing group of people, and the ability to know all those people are pulling for you makes a huge difference. You're right. Yeah,
it makes a massive difference. It makes recovery easier. It makes recovery easier. That's the best way I could put it.
Well, in the opening, I talked about this latest transition for Matthew Shadbolt, and Matthew, you've really come full circle. I don't know about you. I know I connected with the Inman Group around 2010. I think you were even earlier than that, because Brad definitely would have been interested in what the Corcoran Group was doing pretty early. But talk about the value that Inman and the Connect events kind of delivered to you personally. And then, of course, let's talk about the latest announcement that came out of Inman News, and that is your hiring there and your connection now with Inman.
Sure. I mean, as you can probably tell, I'm incredibly passionate about the real estate industry. I really believe in it. And, I say that with the experience of working inside a brokerage, but also working with brokerages on the media side. And my relationship with Inman is a fairly long one. I started as a Connect attendee in 2007, and I started as an attendee. Then I became a speaker. I won their Innovator Award in 2010, and I've written for their website. And then eventually, most recently, I was a sponsor of Connect during my time at the New York Times. So I think that Inman fulfills a very, very important role within the industry, which is what is going on, and answers the question for agents and brokerages: what should I do about this? How should I think about this stuff? And in many ways, they do really sort of set the agenda for what's important, and in terms of time and attention for agents and brokerages. And I think that they serve a very, very important role in terms of education, knowledge, guidance, and insight for an industry undergoing incredible change, technology change, cultural change, financial change, personnel change, any way you cut it. I mean, what's going on with MLSs at the moment, what's going on with venture and investment at the moment, what's going on with the current administration. There's so much of it that intersects with housing in terms of what's important to people. And Inman has historically just charted this incredible path for agents and brokerages over the past 20 years through all of it. And, some of the best experiences I've ever had in real estate have been at Connect. I love both the Connect conferences, and so to see it from the inside now is and sort of be a part of being able to shape what that looks like and work with the editorial team and build great products there. It is a bit of a homecoming for me because it's a community that I'm very passionate about. And I was part of that community. I still consider myself to be a part of that community, but just in a different capacity now. But to build things that are really, really helpful for people that really need it, that is very exciting for me.
I want to get to a couple of things that will really help an agent who's listening to the show, to this episode. And much like you talked about it in 2006 to 2014, your time at the Corcoran Group, things were just exploding all over the place in the world of social media. That was kind of the thing. It's a whole nother level of technology explosion going on right now, right? I mean, the ease of video and the different resources and all the different places you can create video. Then there's artificial intelligence and machine learning and virtual and augmented reality. I mean, there's so much going on. Tell me, what does the individual agent, in your opinion, how does an individual agent decide where to even begin to either focus? Where do they focus their energy? How do they do that? Do they just stay connected to a group like Inman, or what do you think?
Well, that's the $1 million question, right? It's like, where should I spend my time and resources, right? Where should my attention be? I mean, I'm very, how can I put this? I don't think the answer is anything really to do with technology. The means to do anything are available to you, right? Like if you want to go fly a drone and create incredible aerial footage, you can go do that now, right? So, the means to produce anything you want, that's not really a problem anymore, right? But what is more interesting, I think, is that I don't think that we've really solved the people problem as an industry. There are fundamental sort of fears and questions that our customers have around our value and around our expertise that are in doubt at the moment, especially amongst younger people. And when I think about sort of like where to spend time, I always like to start with this idea of like, what is the people problem? So at an individual customer level, it might be like, how do I really help, this young couple that have never bought a house before? How do I really help them understand, what might be a great fit for them and their lifestyle? How do I communicate things in a safe way around like neighborhood choices, that kind of thing? How do I just articulate that every single question in their head I can either answer for them or go get the answer for them? And this is a really hard thing to articulate on Twitter and Facebook, right? Because you have to do it for years in order to really build up enough equity to where people think of you like that, as like somebody that really owns an area. And we did this for years at Corcoran before it really sort of caught people's attention. But this idea of being as helpful as you possibly can all the time is a real challenge for people in the industry, I think, because number one, it's exhausting. And number two, you don't have the answers to every single possible question. So this notion of sort of owning a particular geography, I think, is interesting, but it's sort of something that happens in the minority. So I think, there are certain, in my head, there are certain agents that own geographies within my network. I think of Inez in Miami, for example. That would be like a good example of that. Or Sean in Ohio, or there's a number of them here in the city where I would think of like people associated with neighborhoods or particular locations. But I think it goes way beyond this idea of local expertise. I think it's just being as helpful as possible all the time. And there really isn't like a technology that solves for that. Technology helps you get that across to people in numerous ways throughout the day. But what is it really that people are struggling with? And I'm not sure that as an industry we really understand that enough at the moment.
Matthew, I've had you here way longer than I asked of you, and so I'm going to wrap up with the same final question that I've asked every guest in all 108 previous episodes, and that is, If you could give, if you could, trust me, no one's duplicated an answer yet, so there's no pressure. Okay.
Okay.
If you could give one piece of advice to a new agent just getting started in the business, what would it be?
I would say the greatest commodity you have is your time. That's really what you have. Be very, very aware of your time and attention, and don't be afraid to say no to things that aren't working.
That's awesome. And that is the first time that answer has been spoken. So well done.
Wow. Okay. That was a lot of pressure right at the end there, Bill.
Sorry about that.
This is Ernest Miner on the goal line with the fumble. There was a chance I could drop the ball there.
Oh my! Fortunately, you didn't. So that's good. Maybe that bodes well for the Browns of, let's say, next year. Matthew, if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I'm a pretty easy Google, but you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Matthew Shadbolt on Twitter, and same thing, facebook.com/Matthew Shadbolt. I'm Matthew at Inman.com if you want to reach out to me by email.
Matthew, thank you so much for taking some time today. I really enjoyed this conversation. Can't wait to see you in January, and thank you so much.
Yeah, the first round's on me, Bill. I'll see you in January.
Thank you.